I do very much enjoy sharing my knowledge, which is why I blog, which is why I speak, which is why I come on podcasts. This is really how we raise the bar for everyone, right? If the more you share, the better you are. We're an open source, for crying out loud. If you're not sharing it and helping people get better by learning from what you've done before, why even bother?
Hi, welcome to the GR-OSS Out Podcast, the G Research Open Source Software Outreach Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Faulkner, and today, I was actually having a chat before the thing, and I said that the podcast gives me an opportunity to often reach back into my history and pull out someone who might have been influential, whether they knew it or not. And if you've ever seen a talk by me, a lot of my mannerisms, a lot of the way I put it together was influenced a lot by a talk I saw from Vicky Brasseur back at Open Source Bridge at this point, probably over 10 years ago. So I'm happy to have her here, and now our jobs got a little bit of overlap and we can talk about that some. So welcome to the podcast, VM. It's nice to see you again.
Well, hey there. How the heck are you? It's been way too long. You would think we would see each other more often, but travel is what it is. And you can just call me Vicky, by the way. That's makes it a lot easier than, VM. People don't really know what to do with VM.
Is there a reason why you adopted sort of a lot of your online personas are kind of VM coded instead of Vicky coded? And I kind of wonder if there's a motivation behind that.
Yes and no. It did evolve over a few years to become my public-facing persona. If you see VM Brasseur anywhere, it's me. And if it's not, please tell me, because somebody's camping on my shit and that's got to stop. But it really started way back in the day. I mean, my open source engagement goes back 30, 40 years, a long time. And it started because of the whole gender thing, having a name that is coded female out there in the open source world about 30 years ago was putting a target on your back. So, if you only need 8 letters, which, you do for most of your stuff online, well, VM Brasseur, that'll work great. 10 letters, I guess that one is. So that's the way I started to go, and it just sort of continued going from there. And you know how people like to have their online persona that everyone knows, right? You can find me VM Brasseur everywhere, GitLab and GitHub, and formerly known as Twitter. I have left that, and Mastodon and my domain. And yeah, it's just easier.
Yeah, and at least you have a unique enough one. I can't get JAYF everywhere, but I've started trying really fast when something comes out. I was like, ooh, go get it. It's that's why I like Mastodon. You can have it tied there. And I mean, you're definitely right. That I don't want anyone to get the impression that I would think that the issues around being a woman in tech have resolved over the time I've been in tech, which is more like 20 years. But the amount of progress we've made, especially in a female coded name drops into an IRC channel of a popular open source project, the type of action that would happen now is a lot different than what it was before, which would have been immediately non-technical in nature 20 years ago. And now, for the most part, at least in the communities I am in, and that's probably self-selected somewhat, if that were to happen, those people would probably get shouted down and kicked out.
Yeah, then those are some pretty good communities, because there's still plenty of them who assume that if I show up, I'm non-technical, which, okay, at this point in my career, I'm on the management and the strategy side. So I know I can't go out there and maintain a Kubernetes cluster. Okay, fine, whatever. But I can call bullshit on you when you are talking things about your Kubernetes cluster. Just because I can't do it doesn't mean I don't know it. So still kind of technical. So yeah, there's still plenty of communities that will do that, unfortunately.
Yeah, if you ever see that behavior in a community you've ever seen my name attached to, please reach out to me. That goes to you, Vicky. That goes to anyone listening, because that, to me, I feel like is one of the bigger contributions you can make in an open source project if you're an influential person, is making sure that it's welcoming, so that there can be a next person who's in your shoes and they may not have to look like you or share attributes with you.
Yeah, exactly. We can't complain about burnout in open source if we're actively pushing away at least 50% of the world's population.
Yeah, it's like you want to solve burnout. Maybe you should let go of the flamethrower. That's
There you
hey, that
go.
works on all levels, right? Like, but uh, so I started this out by saying that like you were kind of influential on my presentation style, and I actually looked at your list of presentations. You were prolific at Open Source Bridge, and my memory is not prolific, so I don't even remember the topic. But I remember the thing that stuck out to me was at that point, I think I was doing a lot of the no of writing your talk notes in your slides and then you're like reading your slides to people, which is not good. But I walked in there and you had an approach that I'd not seen in before, which was you had a slideshow that I believe had nothing but memes in it. Like we're talking 2000, 2010 era text on image memes, not AI generated stuff and you had them rotating like every 30 seconds. And it was somehow always lined up with what you were saying. Like not exactly, but if you were like, you know how we feel about businesses and open source or something like that, you might would have had a video of like someone like slightly rolling their eyes come up as like your next slide or something. And I thought that was really interesting. And so I wanted to dig a little bit here and kind of ask the question about like, what made it where that was an approach that you wanted to take? And like, is that maybe one of the arrows in your quiver? Or is that maybe representative of a strategy you use across the board? Or, hey, that was 10 years ago. Maybe you've got even better clues as to how to go about it today.
Well, as a matter of fact, no, so my presentation style has evolved a great deal. But it's still, the underlying principle is what can I do to best deliver the information to my audience? Who is my audience? What language do they speak? Be it jargon or, human spoken language. What are they looking to get out of this? How can I make this worth their time? Because time is the one thing you're never going to get back once you spend it. So I need to make sure it is absolutely worth their time. So I have to prepare. I have to be practiced. I have to be delivering information in a very clear way with takeaways that they can actually do something with. And back in the day, years and years and years ago, when I was doing the one picture and then I'm speaking under it, to be honest, the primary reason for that is that while you're looking at one picture that is somehow related to my talk, I am reading and performing my notes like a script. And I could not do it otherwise because I have a mind like a steel sieve and everything will just go. Plus, I tend to run off at the mouth. So if I don't have these guardrails of my notes, I'm just going to go off in la la land and go off script. So we can't have that. But my talk has evolved a lot since then. And I do workshops now to teach people how to create and present good talks. And so after doing a lot of thinking and a lot of discussing with my audience, I learned that these pictures are cute and they're great and they keep people looking at the screen, but they're not listening to me. What they're actually doing is they're trying to figure out what is this picture and how is it related to what she's saying? So they're not paying attention and that's not good. So I have significantly fewer pictures now and just usually a little bit of text. Apologies for Basil, by the way, he's just going to be a little freak.
Yeah.
So it really is about what your audience needs and how you can meet them in a very efficient and entertaining way, because you are performing when you're up there. You're not just delivering information.
Yeah, I definitely identify a lot with the heavy notes. I cannot operate off of a script. Like I've had that pushed on me a couple of times and it you can tell that like I look like I'm broken. But the notes of like, here are the lines to stay within and the story you're telling is important. But I was kind of curious, like you've given a lot of talks, right?
Yeah.
Like what do you get out of giving a talk? Is it always about like you're sharing your existing knowledge and you enjoy that? Or do you sometimes use the act of writing a talk as the learning experience in itself?
Both. I do very much enjoy sharing my knowledge, which is why I blog, which is why I speak, which is why I come on podcasts. This is really how we raise the bar for everyone, right? If the more you share, the better you are. We're an open source for crying out loud. if you're not sharing it and helping people get better by learning from what you've done before, why even bother? And this is, all of scientific inquiry is like that. People are out there publishing papers. And yes, there are predatory publishers who are charging an arm and a leg for this otherwise free science and discoveries. But we are learning from the people who came before us. So I need to be a part of that, because otherwise we're not going to move our industry forward. We're just going to, march in place, and that's no good. I do also use it as a focal point for learning. There's a concept, conference-driven development. I want to write this particular tool, so I'm going to pitch a conference talk about it. Oh crap, it got accepted. Now I have to actually write the tool, right? And it has to be done and released and under an open source license before I get to the conference, so I can actually be legit. So there's that concept. A lot of people use that. Since I don't program very much anymore, that's not one of mine as much, but I do use it as focal point for my fixation of the moment. So corporate sustainability plans and let's say other words that aren't coming to me right now. But I will focus on these things and do a deep dive. And what people don't understand is that, yeah, we're open source and we're interesting and we're special, but we're not that special. The problems we have are problems that people have been solving and tackling all over the world in different industries, different pursuits. I once fell into a hole about failure, and I have a bibliography of like 4,000 pages of research into failure and why projects fail and why people fail and why airplanes fail, and take that and apply it to open source. Take what other people have learned and apply it to open source. And so that the talks really give me an opportunity to do that. Plus, when I'm freelancing, it's a good way to market myself.
Okay, so you've hooked me. You've hooked me here, especially with the thing with at the end there, because I've always struggled a little bit when I've tried to work in leadership and open source. I mean, obviously, I've been leader in Ironic for a while. I've been on the technical committee, chair technical committee of OpenStack. Like, I have like the credentials, but I always found it difficult to be effective, because one thing that is inherently true of open source is that you've got soft power only, right? Like, there's no way to necessarily have an enforcement mechanism, right? If someone doesn't deliver something they promised, or they don't fulfill an obligation, like, you only have soft power. So like, how would you maybe suggest to people that they can wield that soft power, or maybe there's harder power there that I haven't tapped into yet?
A lot of it is very circumstantial, right? And every community is different. They're composed of different people. They have different predilections. There's just differences in every single community. So there's never going to be a one size fits all answer for things. That said, there is kind of a one size fits all, and it's going to be a lot of communication, a lot of documentation, a lot of following up with people. And none of this is new. This is all standard management and project management and program management and blah, 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 right? You talk to people, you find out where they are, and you adjust accordingly. You communicate expectations and needs upfront, because you cannot hold people to unexpressed expectations. I mean, you can, but it's really a jerk thing to do, right?
Nice.
But you have to set expectations up accordingly, and not just this is the expectation, but this is why. We really need this feature delivered by this time, because that team over there requires it. So we can get our overall release out by the time OpenStack, whatever version is coming out, right? We have to do this, and we have to have it done by this time. So can you deliver? If the answer is no, great. We understand. We just need to know in advance so we can, right? And so it's a lot of asking and checking in with people rather than trying to force people to do things. But also, like I said, every community is unique. Whether it's a team you're working on at work, whether it's volunteering you're doing, whether it's, it doesn't matter. We're all unique groups of people tied together in unique ways through unique networks. If you are in a leadership position, go out of your way to get to know all of these people and all of the people on the outside of them, and just get to know the community as much as you want, because then you're going to understand what drives them. And if you do that, then you're in a position where you can ethically manipulate them to do what you need.
Ethical manipulation. I dig
Ethical
it.
manipulation. It's okay. The entire group needs this. I know that they react best if you approach them via email or via this channel or via that. Okay, I'm going to use that and know how they are going to react best and work with that to get the end goal. So you're working with what is actually functional for the person you need something out of, rather than expecting them to always mold themselves to what the community does.
Okay, I love this because you put a word and you've kind of put generic talk around something that I've been practicing and haven't had a word on. So I'll give you a concrete example. And I think ethical manipulation, I 100% will buy that as the way to do it. And I kind of think of it as like trying to think of the second order problem, right? Because usually if you're working on an open source project, I tend to work on open source projects that are corporate driven. So it's not like this is someone's GitHub repo. It's their job to make this stuff good. So at a certain point, I know that I'm not trying to convince them to do something. I'm trying to convince one of their managers to do something, or someone in their management chain to do something. So the approach I started taking, and I'll give a concrete example, was the eventlet retirement in OpenStack. Was I put together a business case like I would if I was trying to convince my own boss to do something. I got a little bit of resources from someone smarter than me, because I'm not eventlet smart. I'm cloud smart, not quite eventlet smart. I don't go to that deep of a level, but got him to write up a report. And then we wrote an email. I called it a director ready email to the mailing list, with the idea being that now I've given all of these people who I know care about this at some level the ammunition they need to go make the case to their bosses without having to add to their already existing workload. And, what did we see come out of this? We saw an OpenStack effort to retire Eventlet. A member of our community worked from Red Hat, was basically tasked that was his primary thing. And, we made a significant amount of progress now. But I would have never thought of that as ethical manipulation, but that's exactly what it is. That's almost what writing up a business case is in general.
That is
you're
exactly.
like, here's a manipulation sheet that you asked for, boss.
Yes, and that's something that we should all be doing all the time, frankly, is looking at who can be a stakeholder in this, and how can I give them the information they need in order to say yes, right? That is called a business case, because you're speaking the language of the business in this particular situation. You're speaking to a funder, you will be speaking their language and making it as easy as possible for them to say yes. Don't leave it to chance. Have some agency and do what you need to do to make things work in your favor. But never lie, never cheat, never steal, right? There's the ethical part. It's very important, because once you're caught, all of your reputation goes to hell, and you don't want to do that, right? It's easier to tell the truth than to make stuff up out of whole cloth and hope it'll work.
The thing that's really important about the making sure that like lies, including lies of omission and deception, are not a part of that process, that's so important, is that at every step of the way, if you're going about this with good faith, you have to leave a window cracked for the possibility that you're wrong.
Absolutely.
And if you start withholding information from people, you start, sort of going down that path of trying not to give them the whole picture, not give them all the facts that you had that led you to the conclusion, then you're basically saying, I don't trust that person to make the same technical decision I did, or I don't trust my technical decision to hold up under scrutiny. And telling the difference between those is impossible from between your own two eyes.
Exactly. It's really, really difficult. And we have to remember that if things aren't going the way we want, we have to first look to ourselves. Why do we want this? Is it for the overall good, or is it for me? Is it to raise my profile? Is it to help me get my promotion package? Is it for me? Is it actually the right thing to do, or is it the thing I want to do? And there are times when the things you want to do are the right things to do. Awesome, brilliant. Ride that pony to the end of the trail. But other times it's not. Whenever something goes pear-shaped, we got to look to ourselves first to see why, right? Did I screw something up? Did I not document something? Or did I make the case in a way that isn't good for my audience? Did I make a business case that I thought was going to be really fantastic, but I put all of this tech jargon and all this crap in there that, frankly, the director or VP does not have time to parse through. They don't care about the details. They just want to know how much time and money is this going to make or save us.
You want this project to exist in 2 years? Then I need a project of this length of time. And that's all the information they need until they start asking further questions,
Exactly.
right? Like it's just solely a matter of here's your value, here's your cost, including maybe some opportunity cost. You might have to set these 2 features aside to get this done. Yeah. But if you want those features to exist in 2027, we have to do it anyway. So
again, it's all about your audience. Know your audience, know what they want to know, and deliver it in an effective way, which is easier said than done.
So we talked about kind of the talks. I think that's sort of one side of the coin. The other side of the coin of like being effective in that is that people have to have, and I know there's a little appeal to authority, but like you have to be a person who's like respected, who's been in the roles, who has the credentials to say you've been there. And I mean, your credentials are quite stunning. Like usually I would ask someone about their influential in like a given open source, organization or something. But I feel like I'm sitting here looking at your website and just the list of important open source organizations you've been a part of is without number. Like how do you pick like which of those to get involved in? Why, like OSI instead of one of the many other, do a pretty good job, but bizarre style foundation. And I don't want to use the incorrect word because I'm talking to the person who knows the correct word, but I think you understand what I'm asking.
So I call myself open source minister without portfolio because most people out there in open source really identify closely with typically 1 or 2 kind of communities. Like I'm a Rust person, I'm a Python person, I'm an OpenStack person, I'm a Kubernetes person, infra person, right? I cross all those boundaries and don't really belong to any one community as such. And this is really convenient because it allows me to speak with everyone. And I'm walking through the hallways and conferences and stuff and talking to everyone and hearing what's going on. I'm able to connect people across community lines. It's like, oh, you're having that problem? Wow, Apache just had this problem too, and they solved it. How about you go talk to this person over here, right? Sharon's over there, go talk to her, right? And putting people together in a way that they otherwise wouldn't. I think that's been really, really helpful in open source. How I choose to get involved is largely what crosses my path at that time. I joined the board of directors of the Linux Professional Institute because they sent me an email saying, hey, would you be interested in joining our board? Well, I hadn't thought about it. Let me look into this. And yeah, actually, I think I would like to be a part of this because you are right now completely restarting your governance. And that's really fascinating to be a part of that. That's neat. Let me be a part of that.
Best stickers on the expo floor as well, by the way. I must say. Oh, I've got one. I don't have my laptop within reach or else I'd show it up for the camera, but they had one and it said Linux is diversity. And the idea was they weren't even talking about human diversity. They were talking about the fact that there's, Red Hat style and there's Gentoo style and there's, the entire idea of open source should be built around I'm accepting of the choices you made and the reason you chose them, even if I don't agree with it, right? Like, and I love that. And at least when I was at Scale last year, all of their stickers and stuff were all based around that theme. And it really stuck with me. Like it really, really stuck with me. And so it's, I'm glad you brought them up so I can give them a little bit of a plug here for, promoting the sort of things that we all care about. Because if folks are talking, stuff ends up being better at the end. The amount of headache you can avoid by pointing the left hand at the right hand's GitHub issue while there's still flexibility in it before, maybe they make a decision that is, would hurt each other or goes in different directions. It's huge. So I enjoy that. I particularly enjoy the call out about LPI. The other thing that I would kind of note and that I've always been curious about is you've written a couple of books on open source. You're the author of Forge Your Future with Open Source and Business Success with Open Source. What does that even look like to get started? like the idea of starting with an empty word processor and ending up with a book on the shelf at the end of the day, it looks like Everest from this spot. So
and when I finished the first book, I said never again. Oh my God, never again. It's a nightmare. But then I did it again. So so the first book happened because my dear friend Brian McDonald, who ended up being my editor for that book, came to me and he said, you know what? I was in a meeting with my publisher where I work right now, Pragmatic Programmers, Pragmatic Bookshelves. And Andy Hall said, you know what? What we need is a book about how to contribute to open source. And Brian said, Andy, stick a pin in that. And he came to me and he said, Vicky, would you like to write a book about how to contribute to open source? And conveniently, for a few years before, I had been noodling with and kind of outlining something that I thought at the time I was calling step 0. Before you contribute to open source, here are all the things you need to know in advance. Before you even get to step 1 of contributing to an open source project, here's step 0. All the stuff that nobody bothers to document, but you're expected to know. So I'd already
I call those decoder rings.
Yeah.
Like every open source project has decoder rings.
Well, the first book is that generalized across the entire open source ecosystem. So it's how people can understand what open source is, understand what free software is, understand licensing. Now, what are the unwritten rules that you need to keep in mind in order to contribute effectively? And especially in a way that's good for you. Don't just, oh, I want to contribute to open source. Let me run off to Linux. Oh, God, no. No, there are other ways that you can do it that are really good to you. What do you want to get out of it? Because it doesn't have to be entirely altruistic. It's okay if you get something out of contributing back to open source. So that's how that book happened. I was very fortunate at that time that I did have this kind of mental model that I could start with an outline for that book. And so it became less of that Everest you're talking about. Book 2 was more of an Everest, I'll admit. And I can't blame Brian for that one because I'm the one who went to Prague and said, okay, I'm sick of this not existing in the world. And I'm sick of repeating myself as I sit there with C-suites and they're saying, well, why should we bother to do this? Why should we contribute to open source? How is this good for our bottom line? Well, let me tell you, sweetheart, how that is good for your bottom line. And I just really needed to be able to say, okay, go read chapter 7, right? I needed to get all this stuff out of my brain and stop having it be in individual boardrooms. Now it can be spread across the entire thing. And how is it good for your company's bottom line to build, release, contribute to free and open source software? There are myriad ways where this is exceptionally good for your business, but almost nobody does it right. So it's kind of frustrating.
That's kind of a power move to cite your own book in a meeting with, be like, oh, you didn't do your homework. That's in chapter 7. I wrote about that 5 years ago. You're behind the 8 ball here, a little friend. Oh,
I wish it were 5. No, it was only a year ago that the book came out.
Oh, right? Wow. Okay.
So that one's brand new.
You're in recovery still.
Oh, God. Am I really? Yeah, somebody asked me recently, well, what's the next book? Too soon.
How to listen to yourself and not write a second book after promising yourself you would never write another book again by Vicky Brasseur.
Well, it goes back to the sharing your knowledge sort of thing, right? Yes, I would love to get paid to do this. That doesn't mean I have to be the only one to have this knowledge, right? That does not scale.
And it's not true.
And it's not sustainable.
It's not true. Trying to make yourself that point of failure doesn't work. By sharing your knowledge, you're also advertising to people that you have that knowledge. Being open, being sharing about the stuff that you know, trying to teach other people, that doesn't make you more dispensable. That makes you less dispensable, especially in a world like tech, where like the typical person wants to sit down at their computer and write code all day. If you can go take someone and go pull them into a community and make them a part of something, make them better, then you're the most valuable employee that your employer could have, that project could have. You're the most valuable contributor. Like You kind of triggered my trap card there because it frustrates me when people don't value that sort of stuff, because that is all that matters, right? Like, I'm in an open source project that's 15 years old. We have to cycle in. OpenStack is old. That's right.
But
I've been working on it for like 12 years. Yeah. We're the old man on the block. And that's why we in particular have to be aware of this. We have to bring new people in. We have to get new core reviewers. We have to get new people on the leadership track. We have to be willing to let go of our own ideas of what OpenStack is and let some of the younger generations start to take it over. You know, like, I mean, I'm not going to want to work on OpenStack forever. I'm gunning for an early retirement. So if you want OpenStack coolness, you got to get involved quick, learn it, and so that I don't have to do this when I'm very, very old man.
Yeah, succession planning is something that projects do very poorly. And I do have an entire talk all about that, because, you know, there are people out there like me who've been doing this for 30 some years, right? We are going to want to retire. We are going to want to leave. And some of us, unfortunately, are going to, you know, bad things happen. People die all the time, right? That information goes away. Are you creating a succession plan for that? And that's something, currently I'm an advisor with the Open Robotics Foundation, and they are fantastic. Just, you know, shout out to Open Source Robotics Foundation. Great people doing great work, trying their damnedest to continue improving constantly, constant improvement on their community, their governance, just how they do things. It's fantastic. And we are starting to talk about, you know, how can we improve things to bring new people in? Well, what we're really talking about underneath it is the succession plan for all of open robotics. How can we make this better to bring new people in, to create the leaders of the future? And what does that look like for our specific project community? And my book can give you things that are generalized, but like I said, every community is different. So how can we sit down and do this that fits our community really well?
That is an interesting problem. I think OpenStack's done a decent job of tackling that, but it's a problem that I think there are definitely projects that don't think about it until it's too late. But, you know, that's kind of the value of being someone who's been in the community for a while, is we've seen a lot of gross stuff happen, right? Like we've been through the world. We've seen these gross moments happen across, you know, we've seen situations where, you know, and ironic, we had a gross moment related to the loss of a contributor where next cycle, we're going to be removing an entire driver from ironic. And it, like, I can draw a causative line back to, you know, the loss of a valued member of our community a few years back. And, you know, the library he maintained doesn't fit our needs anymore because he's not there to maintain it. And it's sad. And that of it. But, you know, not all of those moments are necessarily grounded in humans. Sometimes it's stuff that we can we can overcome. And that's why, like, when we talk about this podcast, I always ask our guests to share a gross moment that they've had. This is, you know, a situation or a trial, a speed bump along the path to success that you had to scale. And, you know, just want it to be a reminder to everyone out there who might be getting started, who might be trying to get in there, that there's going to be speed bumps, but you're going to be able to get over them. I have, Vicky has. And what do you got for us, Vicky?
Well, mine is considerably more timely rather than historic, shall we say. And that's the entire large language model and machine learning frenzy that we have going on right now. It's like LLM products launched and all critical thinking just went right out the window. I've lived, like I said, through a lot in the tech world. I was there way back in the .com boom, and, you know, before that really exploded. So I've seen a lot of these tech fads, and I've seen enough to understand that to some extent this is normal, right? We had Bitcoin, we had Metaverse, we had NFTs, right? All these things that, ooh, this is the next big thing. Oh, no, it's not, right? We used to have the JavaScript framework of the week, and it would swap every few weeks. Oh, we have to do Ember. Oh, now we have to do this, right? So to some extent, this is normal. But this mania that we have right now, it really overshadows all of those previous ones as a matter of scale. We have leaders who previously claimed to be data-driven and customer-focused who have just thrown that right out the window to chase some mythical pot of gold at the end of a very shabby rainbow. And as somebody who does business strategy, watching this happen in real time is painful. We have developers who prided themselves on their ability to problem solve and to mentor juniors. They now pray at this altar of so-called artificial intelligence, and they're no longer problem solving. They're not mentoring juniors. They're now shutting the door in this succession plan that I was talking about. That doesn't happen as much anymore. We have open source projects being flooded by low quality contributions that are taxing the resources of maintainers who are already really overworked, partly because they don't have succession plans, but also because there's just so much to do, right? There can be so many legitimate uses for LLMs and machine learning technologies, but a lot of these just, they aren't it. Humans, we are fantastically clever apes. We can and we should do better. So what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I'm a user of these tools. Actually, I use Claude Code quite a bit, but I think that I bristle against the term vibe coder. I don't ever use that in a positive sense necessarily because it's not the approach you take. At the end of the day, if you are a maintainer on a project, you hold personal human responsibility for knowledge of code that you submit, for knowledge of code that you review going in. And, I would say ironic, we've seen massive amounts of success using this technology, but we've also seen a couple of downsides, and we are trying to review and minimize. Like we've had this last cycle, we've had a lot more renewed interest in review jams, or we'll have someone who wrote the software come through, walk through it, explain the decisions they made in order to like kind of have a forced slow down, gather context among the cores, and make sure that even if a computer generated some portion of this code, that in 6 months, the human can debug that code that the AI wrote. And it seems like a lot of the stuff that I see. And I mean, I'm even trying to toss out the LinkedIn posts, because if you go down the LinkedIn post, it gets caricature level. But like, you have to be very, very careful about making sure that you keep a firm grip on understanding as you use the tools. And this is regardless of any ethical licensing considerations of that value. Just the shocking thing to me personally is seeing the amount of times that people are like acting like they're a stupid pass-through for the AI. They're just, oh, Claude wrote this, here it is, it's done. And it's like, if you're pushing that, if you're attaching your name to that, you're taking a certain level of ownership of it, which implies you need to have a certain level of knowledge about it. You need to be able to explain what it does. I don't care who wrote the code. I care who's going to debug it in 3 months. And that person had better be the submitter or a maintainer on the project.
Well, as human beings, we have this recency bias. We prefer things right now. We don't look to the long term, right? We don't look to maintainability. And you mentioned the ethical perspective of it. We're not looking at that either, frankly. And as somebody whose first book was stolen to train these things, my second book probably is being stolen right now as we speak, right? I give my stuff away for free, but my name has got to be attached to it. The code that was used to create all of these things is under open source licenses. Each and every one of them requires attribution, and that's not happening. And you can't claim fair use when it is spitting out exactly the same code that went in. And then there's the larger externalities of it. Aside from the massive intellectual property theft, there's also the fact that this is killing our already dying environment. How can people in good conscience be a part of something that is being so poorly managed and so poorly used that it is going to use up all of our water and screw over our environment that we are already killing? So well, I think we've got a lot to unpack here, and maybe we should personally, each one of us, put on the brakes and reassess, what are we ethically okay with?
I try kind of hard not to necessarily put fault in the same way I was talking about with the PRs, like a human should be responsible for that code wherever it came from. A human is responsible for the outcomes here. And I look at, there are folks who I've heard talk like, I can't remember the name of the company, but there's a company, they actually are the people who employ the Debian maintainer of OpenStack, that they do a data center that's under a city, that they do heat exchangers where the hot water that cools the servers goes and heats the machines. And I think like if we're ever going to get kind of out of this cycle, we're going to have to find better ways for humanity in the physical space and in the parts between our ears to integrate better with this software rather than necessarily as it can be used to toss aside human effort. It needs to enhance human effort.
Exactly. So, we are very clever apes. We can and should do better. We're just taking the easy way out. Well,
that is probably the gross, like we talk about gross moments. That's like the gross thread that runs through human history. And, we do what we can to fix it. But I am really grateful that you were willing to be on the show. Like I said, it's, going to that open source bridge, seeing that it did sort of transform my approach to talks a little bit. And I do appreciate that. Honestly, your comments about thinking about it from an entertainment standpoint really is maybe the lesson I learned there, even if I didn't put a word to it today. But, as always, I like to say thank you to G Research for giving us an opportunity to have this chat, for hiring me, for letting us to have a podcast, stuff like that. Vicky, do you have anything that you'd like to plug or talk about? We've already mentioned your books, which you can check out, Forge Your Future with Open Source at fossforge.com. And you can check out Business Success with Open Source at fossbiz, fossbiz.com. And we'll have all those linked in the podcast or the YouTube description below. But if there's anything else you'd like to talk about, we're happy to share.
Yeah, I would love it if people, anything that I said is at all intriguing to you, reach out, because I was laid off last April. And I do have a side project that I'm working on, a completely non-tech related business that I am spinning up, and it's gone pretty well. But I would love to have some consulting time. I want to talk to you and help you do this properly. How can your business be successful through open source? I can help you do that and come up with that plan. So, drop me a line.
Yeah. G Research, the open source software side of the business, the OSPO, has been instrumental to helping make sure that the software that they rely on and they run on is going to last for years and years. And other companies should sort of take a line from that and increase that investment. But thank you again so much for your time. On behalf of Vicky, I'm Jay. Thanks to Ben, our producer, who's in the background, making sure that everything keeps running smoothly all the time. This has been you know what? I forgot something. I'm going to hit something here real quick last second. I'm stealing it from Tabitha. Tabitha's the other host of the podcast. If you're a listener, you know this. Vicky, I don't know if you met Tabitha. I think y'all will get along amazingly. But she added a question to my gross question. I'm going to add it, which is if I was to ask you to point at the small open source project that's kind of holding up the world that you think could maybe get a little more attention, is there one that you would maybe toss a point to, just say, like the good people working on this, and just sort of give them the shout out here before we go?
There's way too many. I should have been prepped for this one, Jay. I would have done research, but I will shout out again to Open Robotics. And it might not seem small, but it really is a very close-knit community, and robotics is the future, folks. That is definitely something that's going to be continuing to grow, and having an open source solution is going to really allow that industry and these things that can legitimately help humanity, allow that to continue. So come join us at Open Robotics. They are lovely folks.
People have no idea the amount of important foundational open source work that's done by the proverbial 2 pizza team. Like a dozen people or less. Just like you would just be stunned listeners of the number of projects we could list off that 6 to 10 people in a room are the ones responsible for. So thank you to Open Robotics. I look forward to our new robot overlords being open source, that maybe I can be their overlord instead, but it's not looking great. But thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next time on the Gross Out Podcast.